the COVID-19 and the new normal. Please let's help me welcome the Buji ASCON. Welcome, Madam Buji.
Thank you very much.
Slide. Space share. Fine. Fine.
All right. The public service, the COVID-19.
I'm not hearing it. Reverend, I'm not hearing. Let me mute my.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, the moderator, distinguished presenters, our esteemed participants, good afternoon. Sorry for the slight delays in starting the program because of technical hitches, but we are on now. As has been rightly said by the moderator, this whole presentation is team positioning the Nigerian public service for effective service delivery in the COVID-19 era and beyond. But the title of my presentation, the subtitle of my presentation is Nigerian Public Service COVID-19 and the New Normal. And what I'll be doing is to highlight the importance of the public service in national development, analyze the 7 disruptive factors plus COVID-19 effect on government business, discuss impact of COVID-19, highlight changes induced by COVID-19 pandemic in the Nigerian public service, that is the new normal, and then discuss factors that will support resilience in the new normal of the COVID-19 era. And I control this from here. Nigeria, like most developing countries, was and is still facing a myriad of developmental challenges, such as high and rising poverty, poor and dilapidated, unevenly distributed infrastructure, rising youth unemployment, poor security, natural resource depletion, population explosion, good governance issues, to name a few. The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic and resultant global lockdown has exacerbated these challenges, and governments must grapple with the fallout through every machinery of government for service delivery to surmount the challenges and keep national development agendas on track. The imperative of the public service. Whether at
But there's no audio.
No audio. Okay, it's back.
It's talking now.
It's back, but they are having problem. Can you hear? They're having problem.
I'm seeing here.
Yeah, it's the same thing.
I said,
Now, you are hook up.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Sorry for the mix-up. It's a learning experience. Anyway, we were talking about the imperative of the public service.
Can
you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. We were talking about the imperative of the public service, whether at global, regional, or national levels. And I was just saying that the public service is the tool available to government for the implementation of development goals and objectives. It is the implementing mechanism for the state charged with translating socioeconomic vision of the state and demands of citizens into tangible social and economic development programs and projects for citizens. At least the public service also plays a strategic of economic growth. There are 7 keys. The Nigerian public service, for example, has existed as a full-fledged administrative system since the federal system was set up in 1954. As presently constituted, the public service of the Federation of Nigeria is defined by Section 318 of the 1999 Constitution as service of the Federation in a civil capacity as staff of the office of the President, the Vice President, a minister or a ministry or department of government of the Federation assigned with the responsibility for any business of the government of the Federation. By implication, therefore, the public service is made up of the core civil service, the armed forces, paramilitary, and parastatals, extra-ministerial departments, and other agencies of government saddled with government business. Tied onto that is the fact that Nigeria itself therefore has 3 levels of the public service: at federal level, at state level, and then local government level. So the public service conducts government business. It is the business wing of government, of state power, of state execution. However, even before the pandemic, there were issues that the business of government had to grapple with. Some of these issues we will call the 7 key disruptors of government business, which implies that even the public service itself was grappling with these issues before the pandemic. So we look at figure 1 of the presentation. The disruptive influence and so on and so forth. As a result of that, not born in the age of ICT. And yet we have to work with citizens in the sense that they were born into the system, and so they are very, very familiar with how ICT operates, what it can do. All of these are challenges that the Nigerian public service has had to grapple with. The degree the oldest to the youngest within the system to handle the digitization, the digitized services, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, we have consultants and independent workers who work within the system or within the public service, but are not directly or permanently employed in the public service. All of these were issues that the public service was grappling with, and then added to that was COVID-19, which is hastening and reshaping the way we do things, the way the public service operates, and so on and so forth. And so it is because of that, the importance of the public service and the impact of COVID-19 on this service that we are having this discussion today. How is COVID-19 unique in its presentation and its impact on the world at large and the public service in particular? First of all, the onset of this pandemic brought with it significant system disruptions at the socio-economic and political levels, with impact that is yet to be fully analyzed and understood. When we talk of an infection, we'll think of health. But the magnitude of the health challenge has resulted in economic disruptions of a nature that generations have not seen. And then secondly, it has turned, the pandemic turned global in very record time, with impact being felt in virtually all regions of the world. And thirdly, it has created a demand and supply side shock to the global economies. Those who are able to produce cannot sell what they are producing, and those who cannot produce and need to buy are unable to get what they want, because transportation has virtually come to international transportation has virtually come to a halt, amongst other things. So what effect has this pandemic had on in the lives of nations? First of it is human suffering, the rapid loss of life, deterioration of health outcomes, and increasing social economic suffering brought about by loss of jobs and other income. Particularly in an environment like Nigeria, where the masses of the people are in informal work. The lockdown caused significant shock to the informal sectors. And then we have a global recession to top it. Apart from the human suffering, we have a global recession, which is one that is yet, the impact of which is yet to be determined. What is certain is that it has been a deep recession, it's going to be a deep recession, widespread, and with nobody able to say when it will end. And then we have a deep financial and corporate sectors distress. We can hear across nations, and even in Nigeria, starting of recent, where companies are shutting down, companies are going bankrupt, companies are laying off workers, and so on and so forth. You also have a situation where stock markets are collapsing. The next slide is just an outlook, a recent current outlook of the number of people who have been sick globally in Africa, West Africa, and in Nigeria. The number that had died globally, Africa, West Africa, and Nigeria. The number recovered, and number of active cases. So we have these significant numbers of active cases, and it is the hope that those cases will eventually taper down or go down. But for now, we are facing a situation with an uncertain end. And so the concept and focus of the new normal is to say that this pandemic has thrown up issues that will create a scenario that cannot be what it was pre the pandemic. And so the new normal is a term in business and economics that refers to financial conditions following the financial crisis of 2007 to 2008 and the aftermath of the 2008-2012 global recession. With respect to COVID-19 pandemic, the phrase new normal refers to human behavioral changes resulting from this pandemic. One of them, to start with, is the issue of social distancing. How long are we going to keep the social distancing principle? Or is it going to become part of our everyday DNA, even after the pandemic? We cannot say specifically, but we know that human behavior is being changed one way or the other, if not informally, but at least formally. Significantly, doctors at the University of Kansas health service system anticipated that the coronavirus pandemic will change daily life for most people. This includes limiting person-to-person contact. This webinar is one of the results of that pandemic, like handshakes, hugs. Additionally, maintaining distance from others and limiting outside engagements to essential matters, among others. Like I said, the webinar idea came up because of the pandemic. Instead of having a conference or having a workshop or something that will require people on the site, we begin with all of these are likely to become part of the new normal. That is, even after the shock of the I was just saying that the Nigerian public service will be affected the workforce. The work itself. How realigning the goals, objectives, and how realigning the work, the goals, objectives, activities, and processes, input and output system in the new normal can lead to improved citizen-centered and service-centered services. We need to retain the following. What is aim and objectives are, what it does, that is the activities it undertakes, how it does its work, that is the processes in undertaking its activities and achieving its goals, what resources are required, that is the input that must go into these processes, activities, and then what is to be delivered, what are the deliverables for the activities undertaken. This becomes important because, first of all, the pandemic itself has reduced government resources, available resources for our results. for the public service to deliver appropriate services. And then the issue of motivation and incentives for doing the right things for the right reasons and achieving the right results. Attraction and retention of the requisite manpower. Pursue. And then tenure, flexible or fixed or flexible tenure in the sense of permanence of jobs. I had mentioned earlier that we have contingents, the increase in contingent work. Contingent work is work where people are paid per project or are paid per or take part-time assignments and are paid for those part-time assignments. That would be something service has been making or work from home or work from centers that are not centralized in a particular building. So the ability to work with minimal supervision becomes an issue of the workforce that should be looked at with regards to the workforce. And then the workplace itself, the decision have to be made. What kind of workplace are we going to have? Virtual or hybrid or physical? And interactions that are going to be taking place within this workplace. So if it is a physical office, then it becomes necessary to rearrange the office, possibly, rearrange offices, reassign offices, and so on and so forth, to keep some of the safety issues that COVID-19 has brought up. And then issues of hygiene, health, and safety. We are all right now trying to get a situation where the workplace is safe, at least safe in the sense that people don't come to work and get sick because the health challenges posed by COVID-19 have not been taken care of. These are things that may have to continue with us for a while to come. And then, of course, the issue of remote, where would the workplace now be predominantly? The public service has been a service where there are offices, specific offices where specific people occupy to undertake specific jobs. With the COVID-19, some of these things may have to be disaggregated. There may be jobs that don't need people to turn up in specific offices to do them. Working from home also comes into play. So how do we go about with the issue of repositioning the public service for improved service delivery in the new situation where the work itself, the workforce, and the workplace are impacted by the pandemic. Accepting that all organizational elements and dimensions, like is the workforce and workplace, may not go back to what they were pre-COVID-19. It's something that all organizations have to consider. So the perception of top echelon of the perception of the top echelons of officers on the impact of the pandemic important, because being saddled with the responsibility to initiate, improve, and implement present and post-pandemic policies will be affected in the short, medium, and long term. Then readiness to explore innovative approaches to achieve effective service delivery. It is pertinent to note that the federal public service, the federal civil service, as a matter of course, has been working over the last 3 years to institutionalize reforms in terms of culture change, creativity, and so on and so forth, capacity building, public-private partnerships, in order to get things done. These activities will have to be fast-tracked in order to get the best benefit out of it at a time where there are many challenges to be overcome and very little resources to do so and little time to. So therefore, the readiness to explore innovative ways and approaches to achieve effective service delivery becomes very important. Says the impact of this pandemic may not go away anytime soon. To accept that the workforce and the workplace are to be impacted. To also look into new ways, innovative ways of achieving results and providing services. How can we do that successfully? And that is where the key success factors come into play. And then some of those factors include we need to have documented standard operating procedures, either at for the public service, and then organizations within the public service also need to have their own operating standard procedures that are in line with the general public service standard of operations. Because where there is minimal supervision, then it becomes necessary for people to follow particular standards of doing things and so on. Entrench e-governance across the 3 tiers of government. E-governance will leverage on the existing technologies to do things that will have required face-to-face contact. and then fast track the transformation of the public service to a more flexible, result-oriented, IT-oriented one. The use of IT increases flexibility. It also increases participation. For example, this program we are running, I'm sure if we had run this program as a conference in ASCON, we will not have up to 100 people. But I'm sure we have more than 100 people registered and taking part on this discussion that we are having this afternoon. So use the IT can assist in the participation and flexibility. But result orientation has to be built into the standard operating procedures and the result expected from those standard from those operations. And then concentrating on citizens-centered approaches to service delivery, using the full complement of available and accessible ICT tools. For those of us who are migrants, ICT migrants, all we need is a phone that will be able to give us information, tell us where to go if we need certain services, give us information as to what the government is doing on any given issue, and so on and so forth. So this provides service without the cost of face-to-face contact. So using the full complement of ICT available, even something as simple as what do you call it? As simple as a telephone for increased participation, increased service delivery to even remote people living in remote areas. And then adopt tipping point leadership approach, which indicates that we need to concentrate on the areas of influencing factors within organizations, because in organizations you have either individuals or activities that have a preponderance of influence upon performance. Once those are concentrated upon, once those are dealt with, once those are handled by leadership, it's possible to tip organizations into fast-tracking changes rather than trying to change the entire organization, which will cost money and cost time to push. But if we look at the influencing factors within the organization, whether those influencing factors are positive or negative, and then we focus on them, then the possibility of changes becomes much more easier. And then build resilient institutions across the 3 tiers of government. Resilient institutions in the sense that this institution can cope with all circumstances thrown their way. For example, when the COVID-19 breakout started in the country, we had a lot of challenges with the with the health and medical system because of the number of people that needed to be tested, where to test, and so on and so forth. So resilience institution will be institutions that can adopt speedily, that can move speedily to address issues of concern to their areas of operations. And then roll out a performance management system across board with appropriate performance measures. That having a standard operating system procedure will also say what the outcomes are expected. And so the performance management system, which the public service, particularly the head of service, is working on, is something that needs to be fast-tracked, because now we have to prioritize our activities, and therefore we need to get performance out of whatever resources are being spent, whether they be human or financial or even time. And so the performance management system will help us fast-track checking whether we are doing what we are supposed to do and achieving the results expected of us as public servants. And then refocus the keys, what do you call them now? Yes. Keys, key knowledge, skills, and attitude to cultivate skills, capabilities, and attributes that are required. And these skills include both hard and soft skills. Skills able to handle technologies in whichever area that may be applicable, and then able to do the things that are required using those technologies, and having the mindset. It is also instructive to note that the Office of the Head of Service is working on the culture change that will contribute to having the appropriate mindset to do the right things at the right time. Distinguished moderator, my fellow discussants, my fellow presenters, I've taken too much time because the technological part of this process has been a little bit problematic. But we can say that before COVID-19, the Nigerian public service was already operating in a VUCA environment. That is an environment that is volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. COVID-19 has simply magnified that volatility, uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. The pandemic will continue, or the virus will continue to have devastating effects on global, regional, and national economies in the short, medium, and probably the long run. One thing is sure, recovery will come, but will be a return to a new normal, not a return to pre-COVID-19 normal as we knew it, but something new will come out of it. And what we are doing today is looking at how that will come about. With this will also come increased and more complex demands from the citizens. It goes without saying that when there is volatility, the demands becomes even more complex because different groups are looking for different things from the same government. The need for public service that is proactive, agile, IT service, and more importantly, resilient-oriented cannot be overemphasized. And what we have talked of in terms of success factors are some of the things that the public service need to have in order to succeed. The need for creativity, embracing change in handling human, organizational, and national challenges as a means of driving forward the national development agenda cannot also be overemphasized. So what we have to say is that, yes, COVID-19 has come, it has impacted and is impacting, and we continue for a time to come to impact the way we do things. But as the public service, which is responsible for providing for achieving the goals of state, the goals of state as encapsulated by promises of governments to the citizens, it is the public service that must become more focused, more agile, and use every technology available to do what it needs to do at the right time in order to continue to drive development forward. So thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Our first presenter, DG ASCON. She has touched very key salient issues in terms of the Nigerian public service, the COVID-19, and the new normal. Without wasting more time, it is my pleasure to welcome our second speaker, Mr. Eniaye Junibi, is the Director of Studies and Head of Department in the Management Studies Department of ASCON. He will be looking at the Nigerian public service and the future of work. You're welcome, sir. Welcome.
upstairs. Okay. The DG ASCON, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to this webinar series. Good afternoon. The topic of our discussion is the Nigerian Public Service and the future of Nigeria. The DG of ASCON has said quite a lot about the impact of COVID-19 and all the rest. So our own is just to take off from where she stopped, and all that she had discussed that has to do with this particular one, we just mention and then we go, we move ahead. To be precise, we are targeting as our objectives the following things: to clarify the concept of future of work, to identify the key dimensions of future of work, and also to discuss the implications of the dimensions for the future of work in Nigerian public service, and also the skills required to be able to do that. We have a few things to discuss to enable us to achieve those objectives. We have the concept of future of work, the trends impacting the future of work, the outcome of solid research work that we can leverage on, the dimensions of work, the implications of the key features for some NDLs, and then we conclude. So we go straight to the introduction. We want to take off from where the DG of ASCON has ended her own presentation, and we want to remind us that a lot has happened before and since the emergence of COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, research have shown that before COVID-19, the widespread availability of telework technology and the feasibility of performing work remotely for many workers did not convince employers that working from home is a good idea. Employers want to put down registers, attendance registers for people to sign and not the rest. They want to see you physically and all of that. In fact, it's part of the performance appraisal form, regularity and attendance and all that. But since the pandemic started months ago, work has changed drastically. And therefore the question is, will these changes persist into the future? That is what we want to look at. Yeah, it is difficult to make predictions about the future. You have to be a seer. And but as scientists, we have to leverage on the data that are available. A lot of research are taking place to further the impact of the pandemic on how work is being performed, and that will give us some clues. For instance, 2 surveys of American workers conducted in early April and early May this year found out that about half of those employed pre-COVID-19 are now working from home. So this session tries to anticipate how work will change in future and the nature of that change, as well as how MDs can thrive under this circumstance that we are talking about. So we go straight to what future of work means, what it means to us. I want to say that there is no single definition that embodies what it means. However, for our discussion, we just describe future of work as a peep into how work will change in the future and the nature of that change based on the existing trends as well as the impact created. So, research by Gardner in US, published in May, has shown 3 levels or 3 types of trends impacting on the future of work. The first set, titled or grouped together as accelerating trends. They include increase in remote work. It's also happening in Nigeria here. Particularly when the lockdown was fully in place, people work from home. Even now, workers are not fully resumed in many organizations, particularly in the public service, and we are still working remotely from home. tracking employees via several methods to understand employee engagement. Of course, when people say they want to work from home, some organizations in US, for instance, and in the advanced world, they are trying to track how well this is being done by their own employees. So they have introduced what we call virtual clocking in and out, and they have internal communication charts and all the rest to track whether the employees are actually doing their work or not, even though they say they are working from home. Of course, we have also seen emergence of contingent, or what we call gig workers. The DG of ASCON mentioned it earlier, that we have contractors, consultants, and all the rest, coming in and all the rest. It has not been too common here in this climate, particularly in the public service, except for the lower level officers and all the rest. But over there is very rampant that you just engage workers for a short period of time to do a piece of work for you and it's paid off. So we now have emergence of contingent, or what we call gig workers. And of course, increase in the use of artificial intelligence. The DG of ASCON has also mentioned that one earlier on, machine intelligence, to help you do a number of things. The second category of the trend is titled New Impacts. The idea of separating critical skills from critical roles. They looked at it from the angle that, yes, skills are very, very important for you to be able to carry out some critical roles, but rather than limiting the roles for now, what they are trying to do is to expose their employees to have a number of critical skills that can take them beyond the current roles that they are performing, so that it makes the work flexible and they can adapt to changes whenever they arise. The second impact is about understanding how to engage task workers in the team culture and creating a culture of inclusiveness. There are some workers already engaged who are carrying out some routine tasks and all the rest. And now that people are working from home and from different places, they are still looking at how they can bring them into what they are doing in the office. So they try to create a team culture and culture of inclusiveness. And on that one, the final one is emergence of new top-tier employers. Well, it may not be so prominent in Nigeria here, but we cannot tell what the future will say. Already candidates outside the various organizations in the service, they're also looking at how individual MDAs are treating their workers under this COVID-19 pandemic. So by the time the future is bright and we have employment all over the place and all that, the employment brand of that organization that has not done well is likely to affect the kind of people that they will attract. The last category is called the pendulum swings, and this is described first as making organizations more flexible by designing for efficiency and resilience. Organizations in the developed world have realized that, yes, we have designed our work to bring about efficiency, high output with little input and all the rest. But they discovered that with this pandemic, they have, it goes beyond that one. They also need, because things have changed, they also need to be resilient to be able to actually cope with the change that is coming up on a daily basis. So they are trying to make careers more adaptive, more flexible, so that employees can gain the cross-functional knowledge and training necessary for more flexible organizations. And the last one is increase in organizational complexity. In the private sector, a number of things are happening, which they have discovered. Bigger organizations are becoming bigger. some organizations that cannot cope are becoming smaller. And then there will be, of course, there have been acquisitions and mergers and all the rest. In the public service of Nigeria, even before COVID-19, there was a Orosanyo report and the white paper on it. And with the COVID-19, the president, we read in the papers and we listened to it on air, that the president has directed the head of service and the secretary of the government to work on it. So there are likely to be mergers and all the rest. We may not have acquisition, but mergers will be there and all the rest. And therefore, makes the organization to be more complex. And that is a new thing that will happen. And people need organizations and leaders there will need to be able to adapt to how to manage such places. So, other research carried out by Microsoft 365 reveals a number of things. That since people have moved to more remote working, they find collaboration more mentally challenging. For instance, you discover that before COVID-19, we are used to coming to the offices to meet, to sign papers, to sign letters, circulars, for office notices and others. But today, this can be done via internet and all the rest. So, and meetings are also conducted through Zoom. Meetings are also conducted through Zoom and all that. People find it difficult at the initial stage, but I think they are coping. And they have also discovered that as people return to more frequent in-person work, as the pandemic eases, it may feel more difficult than it did before COVID-19. So people are getting used to what we are having now. And by the time we are returning to when COVID-19 is done with, they may find it difficult going back to the old normal. And a research also carried out by Microsoft using Human Factor Lab, they discovered that brain waves revealed sustained concentration in video meetings leads to fatigue. Therefore, there is a recommendation that taking regular breaks every 2 hours is important when you have video meetings, so that the brain can recharge. And if you are going to meet, you have limiting meetings to 30 minutes or punctuating long meetings with small breaks when possible. And we want you not to be surprised that this webinar was programmed to be for just 1 hour and 25 minutes. It's as a result of part of what that research is talking about, okay? They have also discovered that the pandemic will have a lasting impact on work. In fact, we have been told by World Health Organization that for a long time to come, we should have it at the back of our mind that the pandemic will still be there, or that coronavirus will still be around, and then we have to cope with it. You discover that you come to the office, idea of the principle of social distancing must be maintained using face masks and all the rest. And we can see that in an office where you have 2 people on left-hand side of the photograph you have there, even though they maintain social distance, they still put on their mask and all the rest. And they also discovered that the 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., or as the case in Nigeria, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. workday, may be fading away because of blending of work and life as a durable workplace. People are used to working at home now. And the last part of that particular thing shows that, yes, people discover that in the morning, when they need to do a number of things, they are at work, they will join their colleagues through Zoom, or they are on the night doing one thing or the other, or on any digital platform. And in the afternoon, they miss out. In the evening, they are back again. And on Saturdays, they are also there. So people are getting used to it. And that is why in the next slide, you will see a diagram, a photograph there, where a mother and a child is shown. The mother is taking care of the child, has to cope with and she has to do her work. So while food items are on the table and on the rest, she's on the laptop. The printer is there to work on, to do her work. So more than half of the people surveyed by PwC in June this year said that remote working is likely to be a permanent part of their workforce strategy for a long time to come. So getting back to future of work, we want to say that as organizations cope with COVID-19 disruptions, they need to rethink and reconfigure rather what they do. That brings us to the dimensions of work, the work itself, as well as the workforce that will require, and the workplace. So the dimensions and the way it how it will look like, the features are as follows. Work will go beyond things done by only humans. Robots are being used, machines are being used at the moment, and we also saw that in China with the outbreak of COVID-19, robots were used to distribute drugs, to deliver foods to patients and all the rest. And it will continue in that particular way. People are getting used to it. So work in the future will involve humans, will involve robots and machines based on what is happening at the moment, and people are getting used to it. Of course, the workforce will be a little bit different. Some of us came in when computer was not there, we are adjusting, but now we discovered that any set of people that will be recruited into organizations, now we have to have idea about how to use the digital platform. We should be computer literate. But beyond that one, the idea of having traditional workers alone may no longer be there. You may have to contend with having contingent workers, or what we call gig workers. We come in, consultants to come and do some brief assignments. They are paid off, they go away, contractors and all the rest. And the workplace itself, based on what we are seeing, we both physical and virtual. Those that will be in the workplace will be there, and there are some that will also be at home, will also still be part of the workplace, doing their own thing, contributing to what the organization is doing. Now, how will the key features affect employees, the ministries, departments, and agencies at the state level, at the federal level, and the local government as well as the public policy put in place to help things? So the implications of these key features for these three categories of people and things and items. For the employees, it means things have changed, and therefore we all need to up our skills to be able to cope with the new developments, how to operate machines, how to use the data platform to do a number of things, working remotely and all the rest. So there is need for continuous learning on our part. And yes, the MD will also be there to train you, but on your part, continuously you must learn. I must say that the first time I got involved in Zoom meeting, it was my children that assisted me because they have been doing that one, you know. So for the MDs, ministry, departments, and agencies, they have to redesign their work, and they have to redesign the workplaces as well. For instance, organizations with big structures and all the rest are likely to face either of these two scenarios. One, that you have, because people are working remotely, you have excess offices, or because of the fact that we need to share distance within the organization, you have to spread people out. So instead of having 4 or 5 people in a particular office before, you may now have just 2 in a particular office and other. So everything will have to be designed. Take for instance, in ASCON, we have redesigned the way seats are arranged in the classrooms. For instance, the lecture theater that normally takes 150 is not to take about 56 people and all the rest. So work will be redesigned, workplaces will also be redesigned. And we need to train employees to be able to align themselves with these new systems and new methods, and thereafter implement these new methods. Training is very important. And of course, we need to look at our existing policies. Those that we need to be reviewed to support this new trend will have to be reviewed. So there have been new policies for the new normal, to take place to support the new normal. So we just want to mention some public sector organizations and implications for them. Ministries and departments generally, where you have the core of civil servants, there is likelihood that we have blending physical, location, and virtual interactions. It's already taking place. By virtue of the circulars issued by the head of service and the secretary of the government and others, up to today, not everybody in the public, in the federal civil service is available on daily basis. The maximum number so far is 75%. And I've also discovered that some MDAs, they rotate. You come today, tomorrow you don't come, next tomorrow is another group of people, so that we can maintain the guidelines issued by the NCDC. And yet people are still working in their various, contributing to what is going on in the organization. So blending physical location and virtual interactions will happen. For hospitals, use of telemedicine, robots, and appointments will likely to take the center stage. The telemedicine will help hospitals. People don't need to come to the hospitals. They can connect with their consultants, with their doctors, to consult and give advice, to prescribe, and all that kind of a thing. As a matter of fact, this era of COVID-19, in China, for instance, telemedicine has been deployed seriously so that they don't have to have face-to-face contact with those that are already affected. Robots have been deployed, like what I said earlier, to deliver drugs and also to deliver food items to patients. Appointments will be a thing that we need to do more frequently. You don't need to be at the hospital, for instance, when you can get appointments and you know when to go to the place. You go to the place, you get whatever you want to get within a short space of time, and you leave the place, rather than a station where you go to the place and you stay there for a very long time and all that. Educational institutions and management development institutions like ASCON, the use of digital platforms, the use of digital platforms with physical classrooms will be germane. Okay, online lectures, e-learning, and all the rest will be deployed. And physical classroom will also still be there. People who want to come physically will still have to run the program. And for military and security agencies, more use of data science and drones, to monitor things and also to do their work, gather intelligence and all the rest. For those in the agri sector, use of drones to disinfect places, use of drones to monitor what is happening and all the rest, and robotic automated processes, even to wet the soil, in the farm and all the rest, and to make sure that things are working very well. Just to mention a few. So we are saying for all of these to work, we need some basic skills. The first one is leadership skills, of course with emotional intelligence. Skills to take decisive decisions, to take decisive actions, integrity, relationship building, problem solving, and all the rest. Strategic thinking, yes, ordinarily it should be part of leadership skills, but we have brought it out because of the fact that is key, and we need to think strategically. In other words, we must have the ability to plan for the future. Don't forget, we are talking about the future of work. So we need that skill to think about what will happen in the future based on the data we have collected so far. Of course, effective communication skill is very important. We must communicate. If we are working in a team, we must communicate effectively well. You are working in an organization, people must get informed of what is happening and all the rest. Office notices, circulars, and all the rest must be there. If we need to send emails, we send emails and all the rest. All those things must be there. People must be on the same page with the others in the organization. Of course, all of these you require digital skills, for it to work. Talking about digital dexterity, we must get used to it. Even though we were not born when computer, we have been around before computer started running its head very well, but we need to cope with it. We need to be trained and all that kind of, and we have trained ourselves, and all the rest. So digital skills must be there. Collaborative skill must also be there, because we must work as a team. Even though you are working remotely, we must work as a team, collaborating with the others in the workplace and in different places and all the rest. And of course, artificial intelligence applications will require human beings to also manipulate. So there is the need for that skill, to be there. And the public service is not immune to it. It's a thing we must also be looking at. We all know about Siri. Those of us who use iPhone, Siri on iPhone is an app. If there is a particular sound, for instance, you can tell Siri, who is this particular person? If it's music, you can say, who is the artist? Siri will tell you. That is part of artificial intelligence applications. So data structuring, programming, and all the rest, you need people in that particular area to enable us work very well to achieve a lot in that area. So in conclusion, we just want to say that the Nigerian Public Service, like all other organizations, should not expect things to return to the old normal. When the pandemic comes to an end, it should immediately proceed on a deliberate and systematic transition into the new normal mood, if it is expected to play its role as facilitator of development under the new order. For us in ASCON, we thought of that one, and as far back as March, early April rather, a team was put together titled Forward Planning Team to look at the challenges of COVID-19 crisis and the way forward. And they looked at a number of things. The recommendations cut across so many things, ranging from issue of health and safety, resumption of work practices, digital learning, marketing of the college programs and services, college finances, management of venture services, collaboration, partnership, networking, stakeholder engagement, capacity building, organizational structure, and how to manage the change. So all of these are germane to our ability to cope with what the work will look like in future. So in this regard, there is need for resilient leadership, extensive planning, digitalization of work process, flexible working arrangements, and training of employees, particularly in IT. This one has been emphasized in the first paper, and is just a reinforcement of that. And this requires creative planning, technology investment. We need to invest in technology, and appropriate budgeting, backed with funds. So on that note, I end my presentation, and I wish you the best. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Inayitini, for that wonderful and insightful presentation. Quickly, I want to invite our third presenter, who has been with us since 11 a.m. Is a man of timber and caliber, as we normally say in Nigeria, a retired federal PAMSEC, who will be looking at repositioning the Nigerian public service for the new normal, the human capacity building requirements, is not a person than Mr. Folayo Ayodele. You're welcome, sir. Thank you for holding on for us.
Beautiful. Hello, you might be heard. Oh, beautiful. Good afternoon, distinguished participants, and good afternoon to my earlier presenters. My presentation is going to be, as earlier mentioned by the last speaker, I'm looking at repositioning the Nigerian public service for the new normal, the human capacity building requirements. So in the few moments that I have, that will be my presentation. Next slide, please. And so I will be looking at taking a background to the human capacity requirement for the Nigerian public service. And before doing that, I want to look at the requirements of the Nigerian public service in the COVID-19 era and beyond. And so as I do that, it's very instructive for me to briefly talk about the concept of national capacity building. Looking at that concept, in reality, there's no country in the world that has zero capacity in the different areas of human endeavor. So the reality is that some level of capacity do exist. So the question is going to be in terms of how adequate. And so it's going to be either low capacity or inadequate capacity that then requires to be beefed up. And so when it comes to issues of national development, capacity building is a critical requirement, most especially at this time for the Nigerian public service. And so looking at the definition of national capacity building, I'll be looking at national capacity building in 3 dimensions. I'll be looking at the creation of an enabling environment with appropriate policy and legal framework that is supportive of service delivery. That is going to also enhance service delivery as a function of capacity that has been built. I will also be looking at national capacity building with regard to institutional development in a way that is also inclusive of community participation. It is very, very germane and important in terms of the responsibility of the public service and the communal awareness in terms of their rights, in terms of their expectations. And then national capacity building is also looking at human resource development and strengthening of managerial systems, in which case we are looking at the workplace and the workforce itself. And so, talking about the goals of the national capacity building, basically, we are looking at enhancing the ability of all public sector workers to deliver service effectively and efficiently. That capacity must be built up. As I said, it's not as if the capacity is not there, but those capacity and capabilities needs to be further enhanced, particularly in the light of COVID-19. The work environment has changed. The work itself needs to be redesigned. and the workforce must be dynamic sufficiently to be able to make the necessary adjustments and adapt to be able to deliver on their services. And so the ability of the public sector workers in terms of service delivery has to be enhanced. One of the goals of the NCB is also to equip the workforce with the critical analytical skills to adequately evaluate and resolve the questions of national development through appropriate policy options and program projects implementation. As earlier been mentioned by the earlier speakers, in terms of critical skills that is looking at forward planning, we must be able to do some forward planning and be able to make the necessary anticipations that is going to protect society from the kind of shocks that we have encountered with COVID-19. The NCB also has the goal of adequately engaging and educating the citizenry on the need for responsible followership that is focused on development. As we want to talk about leadership, leadership must be responsible, followership too has to be responsible. And the kind of followership that we're looking at under national capacity building is the one that is not just looking for short-term gains and patronage, but the kind of followership that is focused on development. Now the scope of the national capacity building is covering a number of areas. It's covering issues around human, scientific, technological, organizational, institutional resource capabilities. Talking about the human, we are looking at the capacity of the human resource that we have and their responsiveness to the changing environment. Talking about the scientific, we're looking at innovative ideas that are beneficial to society. And to be more specific, we're looking at scientific innovations that are beneficial to Nigeria as a nation. Also, we are looking in terms of technology, being technologically savvy. The earlier presenters that mentioned that one is very, very germane. Technology, the use of technology for process improvement is very, very critical. With deployment of appropriate technologies, a lot of our processes can be shortened in a way that service delivery becomes faster, more reliable, and more accessible. And so in terms of looking in that direction, technology is very, very important. Also, we're looking at organizational in terms of cohesiveness. And for us in the public service, the issue around interagency collaboration is very, very critical. We need to put that in the front burners so that the level of collaboration, interagency collaboration that we will expect to see post-COVID-19 should be one that is much more robust, much able to deliver services to the Nigerian populace. And then we look at strengthening institutions, institutional strengthening. In which case, our institutions must be institutions that are able to build capacity. And if they are going to do that, they themselves must have sufficient capacity. They must have built up their own capacity in a way to be able to impact the life of other people, public servants, and at the community level as well. So our institutions must be strong. And lastly, we are looking at NCB encompassing resource capabilities. In which case, we are looking at more resourcefulness in the use of national wealth, looking at situations where we're able to get better value for our money, better value for our resources in terms of resource generation, wealth creation around resource. The focus of NCB is much more than training and covers the following. We're looking at human resource development, which is looking at the process of equipping individuals with the understanding, skills, and access to information knowledge and training that will enable them to perform effectively. As earlier said by the DG, the human resource is a critical component of the public service. And the public service is the tool that government has to be able to deliver on its programs and projects. And so if they are going to be able to deliver on that, then the human resource development in terms of capacity building must be actually on the front burners. We are also looking in terms of focus of NCBs, looking at organizational development. And as earlier said, our institutions must be strengthened. The elaboration of management structure, processes and procedures, not only within organizations, but also the management of relationship between different organizations and services, either private, public, or at the community level. There must be a more robust level of collaboration among organizations. And that way we are able to have better synergy in dealing with issues of development. And then we are able also to leverage on the available resources at the organizational level that is going to minimize wastages. And when we're able to do interagency collaboration sufficiently, it's able to save time as well in delivering services to the general populace. And also we're looking at the focus of NCB is also looking at institutional and legal framework development. And that is looking at the work environment, in which is necessary legal and regulatory regulations that will enable organizations and institutions at all levels to be able to fully maximize their capabilities and capacities to deliver, where the necessary changes that is going to drive that, we must also begin to look in that directions. And of course, what it then means is that we must also have the courage to be able to make those necessary changes. In terms of the specific training requirement, the national public is going to require quite a lot of areas, some of which have also been mentioned by the presenters. And so for the national delivery and effective services within the context of the new normal, the future of work, it must cultivate 21st century skills, capabilities, attributes. That is the tough to teach intangibles. And the areas, specific areas that will require attention in terms of building capacity, we're looking at ICT. At this point, the entire public service, some level of expertise in IT, being ICT savvy, because they are very much essential. If people are really going to be able to work from home, their level of understanding around IT must also be deep. And so specific training areas is looking at ICT and talking about performance management. Of course, we must begin to talk around issues of target setting. Without that, it's one of the critical components of implementing performance management in the service. And so we must begin to address the issues of target setting appropriately so that we'll be able to deliver on the unexpected outcomes. And then we're looking at project management. It's also very, very crucial and important. Talking about performance management, the performance of the entire public service, it needs to be better managed. We don't want to leave issues of performance to chance. There is a system to it, there's a method to it. And at this stage, post-COVID-19, we must begin to go that route. Also, we want to begin to talk around capacity around program monitoring and evaluation. That way, we're able to minimize a lot of issues around abandoned projects. Program M&E is very, very crucial and important. And if we do it sufficiently, it will help us to be able to take remedial actions in program implementation before things go. We'll be looking at leading in crisis. The public service must be adequately tooled to be able to do that. There is also resilient management, not to talk about crisis management, about managing change and transformation. Those are critical capacity building needs that the policy report. Also talking about data management, advanced analytics, and artificial intelligence. In technology now is almost the rate of growth in technological advancement is quite rapid, and unless we are able to keep pace with those advancements, the public service will not be able to perform optimally as is expected. Effective communication is also very crucial and important. Effective communication in terms of the work that has to be redesigned in terms of goals and objectives, work that has to be redesigned in terms of the necessary processes. And so the Nigerian public service must get that level of understanding, fully understand what the expectations are. And in that way, they're able to deliver on those expectations. We also want to talk around critical and creative thinking. It's also very, very important if we really want to begin to talk about innovation in service, and a lot of opportunities for innovation within the service to be able to actually scale up, to be able to begin to perform at the level that other bureaucracies are performing. We also begin to look at capacity building in terms of teamwork and team building, emotional intelligence, and effective supervision. All these areas, they are really very critical areas that needs capacity building for the Nigerian public service. And so, next slide, as I round up, we want to re-echo and re-emphasize that with the new normal comes the need for a new skill set in critical areas in order for us to be able to ensure that the public service adequately adapts and delivers to the benefit of the citizens. This is the time to begin to look in that direction, and capacity must be built. We also must know that the dynamism of the Nigerian public service rests squarely in the readiness to learn new tough to teach intangible skills sets that will help in the delivery of efficient and effective service that is beneficial to the general populace. That level of dynamism must be shown by the Nigerian public service at this time. That way they are better able to respond to changes, and they are able to respond also to the changing needs and expectations of the Nigerian populace. On this note, I would love to stop at this point. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, sir. We are almost there, but there are a number of questions that we've received that we may just read out for the presenters to just respond to in two minutes. Somebody has asked, how can the public service balance the financial constraints and possible staff layoff? How can the public service balance the financial resource constraints and possible staff layoff? Another person asked, given the power tussle between the political appointee and career civil servants, how can this impact on building a resilient institution in the Nigerian public service? That means, how do we balance the political appointee and career civil service power struggle in achieving building a resilient public service? Another person also asks, the need to orientate the public service is key to responding to COVID-19 imposed new normal. And that's just like a comment that the need to orientate is very key. Another one asks, the need to go back to the national report is imperative, but that there's need to jettison the SY white paper is also critical because certain interests were pushed by some people. So the person is saying, can we now focus on the report that the director of the president, can they now go back to the report rather than that's what the person is trying to ask. Finally, somebody says, with regards to capacity building, welfare approach, rather than staff needs or organizational needs, what do we need to do to address this?
Repeat.
With regards to capacity building,
Okay.
it is more of welfare approach rather than needs. What do we need to do to address this? The other person also made a comment about identifying public service jobs that can be effectively carried out from home as part of the future working. These are some of the issues that were raised. So maybe the presenters will have the liberty of picking into 2 minutes or 1 minute what they can respond to before we wind down. Thank you. We'll start with the DT ASCON, whichever one you want to.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Thank you, distinguished participants. I will start, I think, from the end. We talk about welfare rather than need-based training. I think that in a situation where resources are limited and the need to achieve results is paramount, I believe that virtually everybody will come to the realization that using training as a welfare process will not hold water. And so one of the things to do will be to actually have a national needs identification process by the federal government and the state governments in their various states. Because until we have a needs identification report that covers the entire public service, both federal and state, may be able to move from the welfare to needs. Because if you do need-based training, it means that there are anticipated results that must come out of that training. And then measures will be put in place to ensure that there is follow-up to know whether the results that are expected from any given training have actually been achieved or not. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Henry?
Well, I don't know which one to pick now, but let me take the second one, which is about balancing the issue of power tussle between the political office holders and the bureaucrats. Well, the service belongs to all of us, the bureaucrats, as well as the political office holders. Whether you are talking about agencies with boards, or you are talking about ministries with ministers, and all the rest. They also have, they also stakeholders, and there is a need for the politicians as well as bureaucrats to have collaborative skills, so that they need to collaborate, they need to understand, they need to collaborate to be able to move any organization they belong to forward, whether it's a ministry or it's an agency and all of that. And I think in addition to that one, some little enlightenments could also take place. The head of service office is there together with the office of the secretary of the government that's in charge of political office holders. And the training is under the head of service. More importantly, the service itself is coordinated by the head of service. These two bodies can collaborate and have some little discussions, retreats for the bureaucrats as well as the political office holders, so that they can move things forward. We need to do a number of things this time around because the pandemic has already impacted on the level of income that the country has, and therefore it has also affected what comes to the MDAs, and definitely it will affect resources available for us to do our work. So we need to collaborate to be able to move the MDAs forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Folayo, you want to add anything to the?
Yeah, I want to talk in relation to the Orosai report. which somebody mentioned, and there's every need for us to go back to that report. Already there's a white paper on the report, and so the expectation is that the white paper is going to be implemented. And I think basically too, the Rosai report is all looking at making government to work smarter. The preponderance of agencies that we have, rather than being an advantage, is almost becoming a disadvantage and a drawback. So without that, there's that need for that harmonization. And so we need to just take the steps, and then as we go along, we'll begin to deal with issues, other issues that may arise in the process of implementing that report. But the fact is, the service just needs to move forward. And so, and one way of doing that is to just take some steps with regard to that report. In terms of training, becoming welfare, well, the better approach is that going forward, training the Nigerian public service should be skills focused. And of course, some of those areas are already identified in the presentation. And so people, all we need to do is begin to train people around those areas. And if we do it sufficiently, really, they become things that they become the tools for public servants to use. If you train people around performance management, there's no way we'll not be talking about target setting, defining objectives around what you do. And so, and then looking, of course, also at innovation also too, in trying to do what you need to do. And so, when you train people along those lines, in issues of performance appraisal, target setting is very, very critical. And so, training must be skills focused. We want to train people at strategic human resource management. Strategic human resource management is also critical. We want to train people around leadership. It's also critical. We want to train people about managing change. We want to train people about employee engagement. They are all things that are very, very crucial. And they are things that in the workplace environment, those are things that actually confront the Nigerian public servants. And there are things that they can practically begin to deploy in their day-to-day operations and work. And so going forward, I would rather say that training should be more skills focused as we want to push forward the national capacity building. And of course, in terms of the friction that is currently appears to be the power tussle between politicians and career public servants, it's true that if we want to build resilient public service, the two must work together. And so politicians, the public service, we are partners in progress. The public service is not adversarial in whatever form, it's not. And so we need to do more engagement. Just like the last speaker said, that's something that the head of service will need to push forward in terms of engaging with the political masters, politicians, to actually understand and appreciate the public service as a necessary bureaucracy. Globally, no country has been able to do it with the public service. And so bureaucracy is a necessary tool for government. And the fact that they call it a bureaucracy, there's a reason for it. And so we should not see bureaucracies as being totally negative. No, there's a reason for bureaucracies in the public service. And those things must be properly understood, appreciated, and we allow the bureaucracy to function the way it's supposed to function. Of course, we need to refine our processes, do away with the red tapeism. Those are issues that can be dealt with, but bureaucracy is still essential, needed. And so more engagement with the political masters, that becomes very, very necessary. And then of course, in that engagement, we are also able to educate that it is better to allow the system to work. Every approach that is not going to make the system to be as robust as it should be is going to be detrimental to the nation. we're not just talking about individuals. If we want to deal with individuals, maybe no, yes. But then in dealing with individuals, it should be in a manner that is not going to detract from the system itself, that's not going to pull down the system. And so those are my few comments in respect of some of those issues that have been raised.
Can I just say something about the employment financial? I think somebody mentioned the issue of financial constraints and possibility of layoffs. I can say that what I'm aware of at federal level, at least, is that the president is not in support of any layoffs. But further recruitment, at least for this year, is put on hold. On the other side, we have states that have, in order not to lay off, have decided to reduce the salaries of workers by certain percentages. Some states say 40%, some say 30, some say 50, and so on and so forth. That is all in an attempt not to lay off, considering the fact that already without the layoffs, the employment market is saturated with unemployed youth. So if there will be layoffs, it will be detrimental to the psyche of Nigerians. So that's all I can say about that, that at least the president is not in support, has said it even that with regards to layoff because of the pandemic, it's not likely to happen at federal level, but new recruitments are not also likely to happen. But in other areas, other levels of government, they have resorted to, rather than laying off, they have resorted to reducing the percentage of salaries. And like we say, half bread is better than nothing. I think that's basically what I need to say.
Thank you very much, Madam AG. Before I went down, there are just 3-4 short announcements. First, there is a feedback that has been sent to the chat. Please fill and submit to us to help us improve on what we've done today. 2, people have requested for the papers. Please send in your email address and we shall get the papers across to you.
Somebody said, can we not send it in Zoom? On Zoom.
Well, we can explore, but if you have an email, yes, Mr. Augustine Uzo, we can send through. Mr. Augustine Uzo is have his hand up. Yes, please. In 1 minute, please. Mr. Augustine Uzo, are you on meeting? Are you seeing him? Okay. We're not hearing yet.
Hello. Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I just feel like this shouldn't just be a discussion that will be limited between the keynote speakers just among themselves and the few that are able to ask questions. Some of us should be able to equally make an intervention so that it will look really interactive. On that note, I want to thank ASCON for this wonderful initiative that they have put in place, and I'm happy to be here. My only intervention will go to the area that have talked about welfare, taking capacity building more of welfare than skills development. This is not a new issue. It has been a long drawn matter all this while. And I think that the basic problem is the performance management system has been very faulty right from the start. And I'm hoping that the new performance management system, which is coming up now, will be able to address the issue of real performance. It is only in the public service, I bet in the civil service, that people who are underperforming are just allowed to remain in the service. It's a job for you don't have the requisite skills to do your job. The system will prop you up that you don't belong to that system, and you'll be shown the way out. And in our own system, the jobs are not properly defined, and then when people are not performing properly, they are still allowed to remain. Issue of capacity and training as welfare, every training program, we define the outcome. We set the objective and we define the outcome. At the end of this training program, participants are expected to acquire this skill, this skill, this skill. But at the end of the day, are they measured to see what is the impact of this training? And I must tell you, part of the modules that we have redesigned along with ASCON is really looking at the workplace knowledge itself. We're removing more of these academic things that will not help us on the job. We're looking at the skills and competencies that are required in the workplace. And I'm hoping that by the time we deploy that training and run it in full course, the issue of capacity will be addressed particularly. I'm hoping so. But most importantly, we should be able to enforce performance management so that if you are not good on the job, the system will throw you up. If you are writing a shoddy memo that it is not well researched, and through the performance system, your superior officer has been able to warn you 1 time, 2 times, giving you room to improve, and you're not able to improve, you know you don't belong to that system. The system should be able to throw you up so that we get good people to manage the system. Because it's really becoming very embarrassing that anytime you talk about civil servants, we are looked upon as people without skills. Anything goes. I think I'm happy to note that the new performance management system, including the new modules we are redesigning, should be able to address that. And we should be able to talk to our colleagues too, especially the unions, because it's the union members that usually mount pressures on management to say, we are going for this training. What is it? What is there for us? Apart from the skills we are going to acquire, they even undermine the area of skill. Where is the welfare? Where is the DTA? Such that you now begin to take training instead of getting a consultant from ASCON to mount an in-house training for us. We take the training away to Maraba because we want to get a DTA. I am not saying that welfare is not important. Welfare is very important as far as our own environment is concerned. But at the end of the day, it should not be taken at the detriment of the skills that we require to do our job. So I'm hopeful, I'm very hopeful that the performance management system will address it, and the new module under FCIF that we are designing to train officers will address that. I thought I would just make that intervention. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We may not be able to take other interventions, but I think it's very instructive what Mr. Ozo has actually raised. The papers, you send in your email, it can also be sent through Zoom. I'm also happy to inform you that to sustain this tempo of ASCON intervention, next week, Wednesday, 12th August, please go and mark it on your diary. The first ASCON staff seminar series will also be taking place from 12 p.m. Please join us again. Next week, Wednesday, 12th August, mark it. On this note, I want to sincerely appreciate our erudite presenters who have taken time to put together these thought-provoking papers. I want to also appreciate all our participants, over 100 of them. We thank you for joining us and for your patience. And we can assure you that initial technical issues that we had did not even dissuade you. For this, we say thank you. God bless you, and we'll see you next week. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Would it not have been good to put the, what do you call it? The password for the next week on this?
No, we're going to do this.